Rain poured in sheets as K-Town's most feared underground boss finally found her. His missing infant son, heir to a ruthless empire, was supposedly kidnapped by his rogue maid. But as Christian Hale exited his bulletproof SUV, what he saw shattered his hardened heart. Maya, his beautiful black maid, wasn't holding his son for ransom. She was shivering on a freezing park bench, using her own frail body as a human shield against icy winds to keep baby Leo warm. Why did she run? Her hidden truth would tear his entire empire apart. The Hale estate was less of a home and more of a fortress, nestled on the affluent outskirts of the city. Its high stone walls and wrought iron gates kept the blood and brutality of Christian Hale's daily life strictly on the outside. Christian was the head of the notorious K-Town syndicate, a man who had inherited a violent legacy and ruthlessly expanded it. To the public, he was a silent, terrifying force. To those inside the mansion, he was a ghost, a man hollowed out by the sudden, suspicious death of his wife 6 months prior, leaving him with a newborn son, Leo. Enter Maya Caldwell. Maya was 24, resilient, and carried a quiet grace that immediately set her apart from the chaotic energy of the estate. Hired through an exclusive agency to be Leo's primary caretaker, Maya's deep brown skin, warm eyes, and gentle hands became the only source of genuine warmth in the freezing, marble-clad mansion. She wasn't intimidated by the men in tailored suits carrying concealed weapons. Nor was she fearful of Christian's icy glares. She focused entirely on the baby, singing soft lullabies and fiercely guarding the nursery as if it were her own kingdom. Christian watched her from a distance. He noticed how she never flinched when he entered the room, unlike the rest of his staff. He noticed how Leo, who wailed inconsolably for hours, would instantly quiet down the moment Maya pressed him against her chest. Despite his hardened exterior, a reluctant, unspoken respect for the black woman who had brought peace to his son began to take root in Christian's chest. But the mansion was a nest of vipers. Christian's second-in-command, a dangerously ambitious man named Silas, had been quietly seeding discontent among the ranks. And then there was Cassandra, Christian's venomous sister-in-law, who believed she was entitled to the syndicate's wealth and saw baby Leo as the only obstacle standing between her and ultimate control. It was a Tuesday night, a little past midnight, when the fragile peace shattered. Maya had gone down to the kitchen to fetch a warm bottle for Leo. The estate was eerily quiet. The security detail rotated to the perimeter. As she passed the cracked door of the billiards room, the low, hushed tones of a conversation caught her ear. "The boss leaves for the harbour meeting at 2:00 am," Silas's gravelly voice murmured. "And the cameras in the West Wing?" That was Cassandra, her voice sharp and impatient. "Looped. Just like you asked," Silas replied. "My guys will move in at 2:15. It has to look like a home invasion gone wrong. The maid takes the fall. And the kid, well, the kid doesn't make it to sunrise. With the heir gone, the syndicate will demand new leadership." Maya's blood ran cold. The floorboards beneath her felt like ice. They weren't just planning a coup. They were planning to murder an innocent 6-month-old baby and frame her for it. Panic, thick and suffocating, clawed at her throat. She didn't have time to find Christian. He was already packing his briefcase in the East Wing, entirely surrounded by Silas's hand-picked men. If she screamed, she would be dead before she hit the floor, and Leo would be next. Survival instinct, honed by years of fighting for her place in a world that rarely gave her a second glance, kicked in. Maya moved with silent, desperate speed. She crept back up to the nursery, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She grabbed a thick woolen blanket, a diaper bag, and carefully lifted the sleeping Leo from his crib. "I've got you, sweet boy," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes as she strapped him to her chest with a baby carrier. "I won't let them hurt you." Knowing the estate's security layout better than the guards realized, Maya slipped out through the servants' laundry chute exit, bypassing the compromised West Wing. The night air was freezing, a bitter prelude to the coming storm, but she didn't stop running. She ran through the manicured gardens, slipped through a gap in the rusted old perimeter fence that the groundskeepers had neglected, and plunged into the dark, unforgiving streets of the city. At 2:30 a.m., Christian Hale returned to the nursery to kiss his son goodbye before his meeting. He found the door ajar, the crib empty, and the window wide open. The roar of pure, unadulterated fury that ripped from the Mafia boss's throat shook the very foundations of the estate. Silas was the first in the room, feigning shock. "Boss, the maid. Maya's gone. Her room is empty." Christian's vision went red. The woman he had trusted, the woman who had smiled at his son, had taken him. "Lock down the city," Christian commanded, his voice a lethal, deadly whisper. "Every street, every alley. Bring her to me, alive. I want to look her in the eyes before I tear her apart." For 48 hours, the city was turned upside down. Christian's men dismantled neighborhoods, bribed informants, and interrogated anyone who had ever crossed paths with Maya Caldwell. The narrative spun by Silas was airtight. Maya had been a plant from a rival cartel, waiting for the perfect moment to snatch the air. Christian, blinded by betrayal and agonizing fear for his son, believed it. He didn't sleep. He barely breathed. The phantom scent of Maya's lavender soap and his son's baby powder haunted his every waking second. Meanwhile, Maya was living a nightmare. With no money, no phone, she had left it behind to avoid being tracked, and a baby to protect. She was a ghost in the urban sprawl. The storm had rolled in on the second day, a relentless, freezing downpour that flooded the streets and drove everyone indoors. Maya sought refuge in an abandoned park on the edge of the industrial district, far from the syndicate's usual territory. She was exhausted, starving, and freezing. But her only priority was Leo. She had wrapped him in every layer she had, stripping off her own heavy coat to create a makeshift cocoon for the infant. She sat on an unforgiving wooden bench under the broken awning of a closed concession stand, her body curled around the baby, absorbing the biting wind and the spray of the freezing rain. "Shh, baby, it's okay," she rasped, her lips blue, her dark skin pale from the cold. Leo whimpered, sensing her distress, but he was warm. Maya's entire being was focused on transferring her remaining body heat to the tiny child. It was a low-level informant who finally spotted them. Within 20 minutes, a convoy of black SUVs descended upon the park. The screech of tires and the blinding glare of headlights cut through the torrential rain. Christian stepped out of the lead vehicle. He wore a tailored black suit, soaked instantly by the rain, and gripped a loaded pistol at his side. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, were wild with a mix of murderous rage and desperate hope. His men fanned out, surrounding the concession stand. "Maya!" Christian roared over the sound of the storm. Maya flinched, her exhausted eyes squinting against the blinding headlights. When she saw the men, Minasinos and Lusa Lauda, when she saw the men, and saw Christian walking toward her like an angel of death, terror seized her. But it wasn't fear for her own life. It was fear for Leo. She didn't know if Christian was in on the plot, or if Silas was standing right behind him, waiting to finish the job. "Stop!" Maya screamed, her voice hoarse and broken. She pressed her back against the wet wood of the bench, holding the blanket-wrapped bundle impossibly tighter against her chest. "Don't come any closer." Christian paused, his chest heaving. He raised his gun, his hands shaking for the first time in his life. "Give me my son, Maya. Give him to me, and I might make your death quick." Maya looked at the gun, then up at Christian's face. She saw the devastation there, the raw agony of a father mourning a child he thought was lost. In that split second, she knew he wasn't part of it. He was a victim of the same betrayal. "You're a fool, Christian," she yelled back, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Look at me. Do I look like a kidnapper?" Christian's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, the rain matting his dark hair to his forehead. For the first time, he really looked at the scene before him. Maya wasn't armed. She wasn't holding the baby hostage. She was wearing only a thin, soaked blouse, shivering violently, while her heavy winter coat was wrapped entirely around Leo. She was using her own body to shield the child from the elements. "Put the gun down," Maya demanded, her voice shaking but fiercely commanding. "If you shoot me, you'll drop him. Your men are loyal to Silas. If they take him, they will kill him." Christian froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. "Silas, what did you say?" Christian demanded, stepping under the awning. The space between them closed. Silas and Cassandra. Maya sobbed, her strength finally failing as the adrenaline crashed. "I heard them. They looped the cameras. They were going to kill Leo and frame me while you were at the harbor. I had to run, Christian. I had no one to trust. I couldn't let them hurt him." Christian stared down at the black woman who had been dragged through the mud, hunted like a wild animal, and nearly frozen to death, all to protect a child that wasn't hers. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. He reached out, not to take the baby, but to touch Maya's freezing arm. Her skin was like ice. He gently pulled the blanket back, just enough to see Leo's face. The baby was fast asleep, perfectly warm, oblivious to the storm and the Mafia war brewing around him. Christian's heart plummeted into his stomach as the horrific truth washed over him. He had been hunting the wrong person. He had ordered a hit on his son's savior. Without a word, Christian stripped off his own suit jacket and draped it over Maya's trembling shoulders. He didn't order his men to grab her. Instead, he wrapped his arms around both Maya and the baby, lifting them from the bench together. "Stand down!" Christian barked at his men, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Clear the perimeter. We're going home." As he carried her to the SUV, Maya buried her face in his chest, finally letting the exhaustion pull her into darkness. Christian held them tight, a lethal new fire burning in his eyes. Silas and Cassandra were dead walking. The return to the Hale estate was silent, tense, and heavily guarded. Christian didn't trust anyone. He bypassed his usual security detail, calling in a private, fiercely loyal extraction team led by an old friend named Arthur. When the SUV pulled into the underground garage, Christian carried the unconscious Maya and the sleeping baby straight up to his private, biometric-locked penthouse suite, a place no one in the syndicate had access to. A private doctor was summoned. Leo was given a clean bill of health, perfectly unharmed thanks to Maya's desperate sacrifice. Maya, however, was in rough shape. She was suffering from severe hypothermia, exhaustion, and malnourishment. Christian sat by her bedside for hours, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest under the heavy down comforters. He couldn't reconcile the image of the ruthless, calculating world he lived in with the pure, selfless bravery this woman had shown. In his world, loyalty was bought with blood or money. Maya had given hers out of love. When Maya finally fluttered her eyes open the next afternoon, the first thing she saw was Christian sitting in a leather armchair beside the bed, holding a sleeping Leo against his chest. The sight made her breath catch. The terrifying Mafia boss looked remarkably tender, his chin resting gently on his son's soft hair. "He's safe," Christian said, his voice low and gravelly. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Because of you." Maya pushed herself up against the pillows, wincing slightly as her stiff muscles protested. "Where are we? Where is Silas?" "You're in my private wing," Christian answered, shifting Leo carefully before standing up. He poured a glass of warm water and handed it to her. "And Silas thinks you slipped through our fingers at the park. I had my loyal men leak a false report. Right now, Silas and Cassandra believe you're still on the run with the boy." Maya gripped the glass, her hands still trembling slightly. "You believe me?" Christian sighed, running a hand over his face. He looked exhausted, older than his 30 years. I pulled the security logs from the West Wing. Just like you said, there was a manual override initiated from Silas's terminal at 1:45 a.m. The cameras were looped. If you hadn't taken Leo, Christian swallowed hard, the terrifying reality of what could have happened, choking him. He stepped closer to the bed, looking down at her with a raw, intense gratitude. You saved my world, Maya. You sacrificed everything to protect a child that isn't yours. Why? Maya looked down at her hands. Because he's innocent, and because I know what it's like to be unprotected in a world that wants to throw you away. I lost my own mother when I was young. I wasn't going to let Leo lose the only life he had. Christian felt a strange tightening in his chest. For years, he had walled off his emotions, operating purely on logic, power, and fear. But looking at Maya, her quiet strength, her striking beauty, the profound depth of her character, he felt the walls cracking. I owe you my life, Christian said softly. But right now, we have a problem. The syndicate is infected. If Silas and Cassandra were willing to hit my son, they have backing from the inside. I need to purge my own house. And I have to do it before they realize you're here. Maya's eyes widened. What are you going to do? Christian's expression shifted, the tender father vanishing, replaced once again by the ruthless mob boss. But this time, Maya wasn't afraid of him. She realized that his darkness was a weapon, and right now, it was a weapon drawn to protect her and Leo. I'm going to set a trap, Christian said, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. I'm going to call a summit of the capos tomorrow night in the main dining hall. I will announce that I've found you, and that I've retrieved Leo. I'll tell them you're locked in the basement, awaiting execution. Silas won't be able to resist coming down to silence you before you can talk. And when he comes down? Maya asked, her heart pounding. I'll be waiting in the dark, Christian replied. He reached out, his fingertips gently brushing a stray curl away from Maya's face. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. No one touches what is mine, Maya, and that includes you. From now on, you are under my personal protection. Anyone who looks at you wrong will answer to me. The shift in their dynamic was palpable. She was no longer just the maid. She was the woman who held the heart of his family in her hands, and the spark of something incredibly dangerous, passionate, and fiercely loyal was igniting between them. But outside the locked doors of the penthouse, the mansion was swarming with traitors. The real war was just beginning. The tension inside the Hale estate was thick enough to choke on. The storm that had nearly claimed Maya and Leo's lives had finally broken, leaving behind a damp, suffocating fog that rolled across the manicured lawns. Inside the grand dining hall, crystal chandeliers cast a cold, glittering light over the long mahogany table. Christian Hale sat at the head, his face an impenetrable mask of absolute authority. To his left and right sat the 5 capos of the K-Town syndicate. Among them were Dominic Russo, an old-school enforcer with a scarred jaw, and Liam Gallagher, a ruthless financial operator. But Christian's eyes, cold and unblinking, were fixed on the man sitting directly opposite him at the far end of the table. Silas. Silas was holding his liquor well, playing the part of the grieving, outraged second-in-command to perfection. Boss, my men are still sweeping the grid, Silas lied smoothly, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. The Caldwell woman couldn't have gotten far with the boy. We'll find her. We'll make her pay for this treason. Christian picked up his own glass, the ice clinking against the sides in the dead silence of the room. You don't need to sweep the grid anymore, Silas. The temperature in the room plummeted. Every capo stopped breathing. Silas's hand paused halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? I said. Call off the dogs, Christian declared, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that echoed off the marble walls. Arthur's private extraction team found her hiding in the industrial district 3 hours ago. She had Leo, A flicker of genuine panic so fast it was almost imperceptible flashed through Silas's eyes before he masked it with feigned relief. Thank God. The boy? Is he? Leo is safe, Christian said, leaning forward, resting his forearms on the table. As for the maid, she's currently locked in the soundproof interrogation cell in the sub-basement. She's chained to the floor. I haven't broken her yet to find out who hired her, but I will. Tomorrow morning, I'm bringing in Dr. Thomas Aris to administer sodium pentothal. She's going to sing, and then I'm going to skin her alive. Silas swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. Boss, let me handle the interrogation. You shouldn't have to muddy your hands with the woman who put your son in danger. Let me go down there tonight and get the names. Christian smiled. It was a terrifying, blood-chilling expression. No, I want her to sweat in the dark tonight. No one goes near the sub-basement. We reconvene tomorrow, at dawn. Dismissed. As the capos filed out of the dining room, Christian remained in his seat. He watched Silas's back as the traitor hurried down the hallway. The bait was set. The rat was heading for the trap. Down in the sub-basement, the air was stale and smelled of copper and damp concrete. The solitary confinement cell was a relic from Christian's father's reign, designed specifically to ensure screams never reached the upper floors. There was no light, save for the faint red glow of an emergency exit sign down the hall. At 2:00 a.m., the heavy steel door to the basement levels creaked open. Silas descended the concrete stairs, his footsteps muffled by tactical, rubber-soled boots. In his right hand, he gripped a 9mm Glock, fitted with a matte black suppressor. He moved with the precision of a trained killer, his breathing shallow, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He approached the reinforced steel door of the interrogation cell. It was slightly ajar. Silas pushed it open with the barrel of his gun, stepping into the pitch-black room. Nothing personal, sweetheart, Silas whispered into the darkness, raising his weapon toward where the chains usually hung. You were just in the wrong place, at the wrong click. The blinding 1,000-lumen glare of a tactical floodlight snapped on, pinning Silas against the back wall like a moth. He threw his arm over his eyes, cursing violently, and swung his gun blindly toward the light. Drop it, Silas. Christian's voice hissed from the shadows behind the light. It wasn't a request. It was a promise of immediate death. Before Silas could pull the trigger, a suppressed shot coughed from the dark. A bullet tore through Silas's right shoulder, shattering his collarbone. He screamed, dropping the Glock as he collapsed to the concrete floor, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Christian stepped out from behind the floodlight, a smoking Sig Sauer in his hand. He wasn't wearing his tailored suit anymore. He was wearing a black tactical shirt, his sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and dark ink. He looked like the devil himself. You really thought I was stupid enough to leave her down here? Christian asked, kicking Silas's fallen weapon across the floor. He grabbed Silas by the throat and slammed him against the concrete wall. I saw the security logs, you piece of filth. You bypassed the West Wing cameras. You sent those men to my son's nursery. Lettuce coughed, blood spattering his lips. It wasn't just me. You're blind, Christian. Your empire is rotting from the inside out. Cassandra, Christian growled, pressing the searing hot barrel of his gun directly against the bullet wound in Silas's shoulder. Silas shrieked in agony as the flesh sizzled. Tell me everything. Now. She promised me half. Silas sobbed, his bravado entirely broken under Christian's ruthless grip. She said if the boy was gone, you'd unravel. The capos would vote you out, and she would step in as the rightful heir to the K-Town throne. I was just following the money. Christian's eyes were dead voids. Did she act alone? Silas laughed, a wet, bubbling sound of pure despair. You really don't know, do you? Cassandra has always hated you. She hated that your wife got the ring, the power, the child. Why do you think your wife's heart just gave out 6 months ago, Cassandra poisoned her. Christian, she poisoned her. And she was going to have me put a bullet in your son. The world stopped. The revelation hit Christian like a freight train, tearing through his chest and leaving a gaping, bleeding hole where his heart used to be. His wife, his beautiful, gentle wife, hadn't died of a congenital defect. She had been murdered by her own sister, and that same sister had nearly slaughtered his infant son. A terrifying, unnatural calm washed over Christian. The roaring in his ears faded into absolute silence. "Thank you, Silas," Christian whispered softly. He raised his gun, placed it directly between Silas's eyes, and pulled the trigger. The penthouse was quiet, save for the rhythmic patter of residual rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya was sitting in the velvet armchair by the fireplace, gently rocking Leo, who was sleeping peacefully against her chest. She had finally bathed, washing away the grime and freezing rain of the past 2 days, and was dressed in one of Christian's oversized silk dress shirts. The dark emerald green of the fabric contrasted beautifully with her rich brown skin. When the biometric lock on the penthouse doors clicked open, Maya tensed, instinctively pulling Leo closer. Christian walked in. He moved slowly, mechanically. The tactical shirt he wore was splattered with dark, wet blood. His hands were stained red. He didn't say a word. He just walked toward the center of the living room and collapsed onto the heavy leather sofa, burying his face in his blood-stained hands. A ragged, broken sound escaped his throat. Maya carefully placed the sleeping baby into his high-tech bassinet, making sure the monitors were on. She didn't run from the blood. Growing up in the foster system, she had seen her fair share of violence and broken men. But seeing the untouchable king of K-Town breaking down in his living room pulled painfully at her heart. She walked into the adjoining master bathroom, wet a thick, warm towel with hot water, and returned to the living room. She knelt on the floor between Christian's legs. "Christian," she murmured softly. He flinched, looking up at her. His dark eyes were bloodshot, swimming with a grief so profound it looked as though it were tearing him apart from the inside. "He confessed," Christian whispered, his voice trembling. "Silas confessed. And he told me about my wife. It wasn't a heart attack, Maya. Cassandra poisoned her. She murdered my wife, and she tried to kill my son." Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The sheer, calculated evil of it took her breath away. Cassandra was family. "I killed him," Christian said, staring at his blood-soaked hands as if they belonged to a stranger. "I executed my closest friend, and I didn't even blink. But it doesn't bring her back. It doesn't make my son safe. Cassandra is still out there." Maya reached out and gently took his massive, trembling hands in hers. She didn't recoil from the blood. With slow, deliberate movements, she began to wipe the blood from his skin with the warm towel. "You did what you had to do to protect your son," Maya said, her voice a steady, grounding anchor in his stormy sea. "You are not a monster for protecting your blood, Christian. You are a father." Christian looked down at her. Her dark hair was falling in soft curls around her face, her deep brown eyes glowing with a fierce, empathetic warmth that he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't judging him. She was grounding him. The contrast between the horrific violence he had just committed in the basement and the tender, healing touch of her hands in the penthouse was jarring, yet intoxicating. "You should leave," Christian whispered, leaning forward, his forehead coming to rest against hers. The scent of her clean, warm like vanilla and rain was overriding the metallic stench of the blood. "I can give you a new identity, millions of dollars. You can go somewhere safe, where Cassandra and this life can never touch you." "No," Maya answered instantly, her voice firm. She didn't pull away from his touch. "I'm not running. Leo needs me. And..." She hesitated, her breath catching as Christian's thumb gently traced the curve of her jawline. "I think you need me too." Christian closed his eyes, a shudder running through his massive frame. "I'm going to burn this city to the ground to find her, Maya. It's going to be a bloodbath. I cannot guarantee your safety if you stay here. Then teach me how to survive it, Maya demanded, her gaze unwavering. I won't be a sitting duck in a golden cage. If Cassandra wants a war, let her have it. But she is not getting this baby. I will kill her myself if she tries. Christian's eyes snapped open, the raw, protective ferocity radiating from the beautiful black woman in front of him ignited a fire in his veins that he hadn't expected. He had hired a maid. He had found a queen. By dawn, the syndicate was in absolute chaos. Silas's lifeless body was found hanging from the iron gates of the estate. A clear, brutal message to any remaining traitors. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. K-Town was purging. Cassandra, realizing her second, in command, had failed and sung like a canary, vanished. She abandoned her luxury penthouse downtown and took her loyalists underground. Desperate for manpower, she forged a dark alliance with the O'Reillys, a brutally violent Irish mob that had been trying to muscle into K-Town's harbour territories for a decade. True to his word, Christian began Maya's training the very next day. He cleared out the estate's underground firing range. He handed her a compact, sleek 9mm Heckler and cock. Stance wide, Christian commanded, stepping behind her. The atmosphere in the shooting range was electric, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder, and the undeniable, simmering tension between them. Maya raised the weapon, her hands shaking slightly. Christian stepped impossibly closer, his chest pressing flush against her back. He reached around her, his large, calloused hands covering hers, adjusting her grip on the pistol. The physical contact sent a jolt of heat straight to her core. "Breathe in," he murmured, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear. Maya shivered, her pulse skyrocketing. "Exhale. Squeeze. Don't pull." Bang! The target 50 feet down the lane jerked. A perfect shot, right in the center mass. "Good," Christian breathed, his voice low and husky. He didn't step back. "Now do it again, because the men Cassandra sends won't give you a second chance." The war escalated faster than anyone anticipated. Within a week, the city was bleeding. Two of Christian's legitimate front businesses, a high-end nightclub and a logistics warehouse, were firebombed by O'Reilly's men. In retaliation, Dominic Russo and Arthur led K-Town enforcers to slaughter an entire O'Reilly shipment of illegal weapons at the docks. The streets were an open war zone, and the police, heavily bribed by both sides, looked the other way. Despite the chaos outside, the Hale estate remained heavily fortified. Maya spent every waking moment either caring for Leo or in the range, drilling until her hands were blistered, and she could field strip her weapon blindfolded. She was no longer just the maid. She was a recognized fixture in the estate. Christian's men, seeing the respect their boss gave her, treated her with a reverent deference. They called her Miss Caldwell and saluted when she walked past. But Cassandra was growing desperate. The alliance with the O'Reillys was costing her millions, and Christian was systematically dismantling her financial networks. She needed a killing blow. It happened on a Tuesday night, exactly 2 weeks after Maya had fled into the storm. Christian was in his downstairs study, poring over tactical maps with Liam Gallagher, trying to pinpoint Cassandra's new stronghold. Maya was upstairs in the penthouse nursery, feeding Leo his late-night bottle. Suddenly, the estate's klaxons blared a deafening, piercing alarm that meant the outer perimeter had been breached. The lights flickered, died, and were instantly replaced by the blood-red glow of the emergency backup generators. "Breach! At the north gate!" Arthur's voice crackled over the secure comms system. "Multiple hostiles, heavily armed. It's the Irish." In the study, Christian flipped the heavy mahogany desk, pulling 2 assault rifles from the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. He tossed one to Liam. "Hold the main hall. Nobody gets up those stairs." Up in the penthouse, Maya didn't panic. Her training kicked in with terrifying clarity. She placed the sleeping Leo into the reinforced panic room built into the back of his closet. Locking the titanium door, she grabbed her heckler and cock, chambered around, and positioned herself behind the heavy oak door of the nursery, her heart pounding a steady, lethal rhythm in her chest. Downstairs, the battle was deafening. The heavy thud of breaching charges blew the massive front doors off their hinges. Automatic gunfire tore through the priceless artwork and marble pillars of the grand foyer. Christian, moving like a phantom in the strobe lights of the gunfire, took down 3 of O'Reilly's men before they even realized he was there. "Push them back," Christian roared, vaulting over a shattered marble fountain and firing a 3-round burst into a masked attacker. But there were too many. A splinter group of 4 heavily armed mercenaries bypassed the main firefight, using grapple launchers to scale the exterior walls of the mansion, heading straight for the penthouse balconies. Cassandra had given them the blueprints. They knew exactly where the baby was. The glass of the nursery balcony shattered inward, spraying shards across the plush carpet. 2 men in tactical gear rolled into the room, assault rifles raised. Maya didn't hesitate. She stepped out from behind the door, dropping into the crouch. Christian had drilled into her muscle memory. Bang, bang, 2 shots. The first man dropped, a bullet catching him squarely in the gap of his body armor at the neck. The second man spun toward her, raising his rifle. Maya dove behind the heavy cherrywood changing table as a hail of bullets ripped through the wall where she had just been standing. Splinters showered over her. She took a deep breath, visualizing the room, visualizing the angle. She rolled out from the other side of the table, firing twice. The second man crumpled to the floor, groaning in agony as his kneecap shattered, dropping his weapon. Maya stood up, her chest heaving, the gun still pointed unwaveringly at the wounded man. Just then, Christian burst through the nursery doors, covered in plaster dust and blood, his eyes wild with a terror he had never known. When he saw Maya standing over the neutralized attackers, unharmed, with the panic room perfectly secure, the relief that washed over him nearly dropped him to his knees. He crossed the room in 2 massive strides, kicking the wounded mercenary's rifle away before pulling Maya into a bone-crushing embrace. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, his massive frame shaking. "I've got you," Maya whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist, dropping her empty gun to the floor. "Leo is safe. We're safe." Christian pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. He looked at her not as a subordinate, not as a civilian he needed to protect, but as an equal, as a partner. Without thinking, driven by the adrenaline and the overwhelming realization of how close he had come to losing her, he crashed his lips down onto hers. The kiss was desperate, bruised, and hungry. Maya melted into it, her hands tangling in his dark hair, kissing him back with an equal, consuming fire. All the unspoken tension, the fear, the grief, and the undeniable attraction ignited into an inferno. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Christian rested his forehead against hers. "They breached my home," Christian growled, his voice a lethal vibration against her skin. "They came for my family." He turned his attention to the wounded mercenary groaning on the floor. Christian walked over, his boot pressing hard down on the man's shattered knee. The mercenary shrieked. "Where is she?" Christian demanded, his voice devoid of all humanity. "Where is Cassandra?" The man spat blood onto the carpet. "Shipping yard. Pier 44. She's locked down in the old O'Reilly warehouse." Christian lifted his boot and delivered a sickening kick to the man's head, knocking him unconscious. He turned back to Maya, picking up his dropped rifle. The romantic tenderness from seconds ago was gone, replaced by the terrifying aura of a Mafia king going to war. "Stay here, with Arthur's detail," Christian commanded. "Lock the penthouse down." Maya picked up her pistol and slapped a fresh magazine into it. "No, I'm going with you." Christian stopped, looking at her in disbelief. "Maya, it's a suicide mission. It's a fortified compound. She tried to murder the baby I love." Maya said, her brown eyes blazing with an unyielding, terrifying resolve. She poisoned the woman who gave him life. I am not sitting in a tower waiting to hear if you survive. We end this tonight. Together. Christian stared at her for a long moment. A slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face. He reached into his tactical vest, pulling out a spare earpiece, and handed it to her. "Welcome to the syndicate, Miss Caldwell," he said. "Let's go kill my sister-in-law." The drive to the harbour was cloaked in a tense, suffocating silence. 3 matte black armoured SUVs tore through the rain-slicked streets of the city, ignoring every red light. Inside the lead vehicle, Christian sat in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the looming industrial skyline. He was meticulously checking the magazines of his assault rifle. Beside him, in the driver's seat, Dominic Russo handled the heavy vehicle with grim precision. In the back seat sat Maya. She was outfitted in a lightweight Kevlar vest over her clothes, her heckler and cock holstered at her thigh, and an extra compact Glock tucked into the small of her back. She stared out the tinted window, her reflection showing a woman transformed. She was no longer the quiet, invisible maid who had arrived at the Hale estate 6 months ago. The blood on her hands and the fire in her chest had forged her into something entirely new. Dominic glanced at Maya through the rearview mirror. He was an old-school enforcer, a man who believed the syndicate was a place solely for hardened killers. But after seeing the bodies of the mercenaries she had dropped in the nursery, his skepticism had evaporated into a silent, profound respect. "We are 2 miles out, boss," Dominic reported, his gruff voice breaking the silence. "Arthur's vanguard team is already in position by the south shipping crates. The O'Reillys have the main gates locked down tight. Snipers on the crane towers." Christian nodded, his jaw set. "We don't take the main gates. Cassandra is expecting a frontal assault. She wants us to bleed in the open. We take the water." Maya leaned forward. "The water? Pier 44 is built over a deep water dredge," Christian explained, pulling up a glowing blueprint on a tactical tablet and handing it back to her. "There's an old maintenance tunnel underneath the loading docks, accessible only by scuba or Zodiac boat. It leads straight up into the sublevels of the warehouse. We bypass the snipers, come up through the floorboards, and hollow them out from the inside. 10 minutes later, the SUVs parked discreetly under the shadow of an abandoned overpass, half a mile down the coastline from Pier 44. The freezing wind whipped off the black, churning water of the harbour, smelling of salt, rust and decay. Arthur and a team of 6 elite K-Town operatives were waiting by 2 rigid-hulled inflatable Zodiac boats, their engines idling silently. "Target is the main administrative office on the top floor overlooking the warehouse," Christian instructed his men, his voice slicing through the wind. "Arthur, you and your squad sweep the ground floor. Disable their comms and power grid. Dominic, you take the catwalks. Maya is with me. We push straight up the central stairwell to Cassandra. No prisoners." The men racked their weapons in unison. There was no hesitation. The boat ride was a pitch-black, freezing nightmare. The Zodiacs sliced through the choppy water, dodging floating debris as they maneuvered directly beneath the massive steel pilings of Pier 44. Above them, they could hear the muffled shouts of the O'Reilly guards patrolling the docks, entirely oblivious to the lethal force gliding right beneath their feet. Christian steered their boat toward a rusted, heavy iron grate set into the concrete foundation. Dominic hauled himself up, using heavy bolt cutters to snap the ancient padlocks. The grate swung open with a screech that was quickly swallowed by the crashing waves. "Up," Christian commanded softly. They climbed a slick, algae-covered ladder in total darkness, emerging into the damp, echoing sub-level of the warehouse. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and old timber. Above them, the floorboards vibrated with the heavy footsteps of their enemies. "Comms check," Christian whispered, tapping his earpiece. "Vanguard in position." Arthur's voice crackled. "Ready to cut the lights on your mark." Christian looked at Maya. Her breathing was steady. She held her 9mm with both hands, her dark eyes scanning the shadows with lethal focus. He reached out, his thumb briefly brushing against her cheekbone, a silent promise. "Mark," Christian said. Instantly, the massive warehouse above them plunged into absolute darkness. The sudden blackout was followed by shouts of confusion from the O'Reilly men. 10 seconds later, the staccato roar of suppressed gunfire echoed from the ground floor as Arthur's team began the purge. Christian kicked open the access door to the central stairwell, and the siege began. They moved with terrifying synchronization. Christian took the lead, his assault rifle cutting down any hostile that rushed into the stairwell. Maya covered their flank and blind spots. When a burly Irish enforcer kicked open the door to the second-floor landing and lunged at Christian from behind with a combat knife, Maya didn't even blink. She pivoted, firing twice. The enforcer dropped dead before his blade could even graze Christian's tactical vest. "Clear," Maya announced, stepping over the body without hesitation. Christian glanced back, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a mixture of adrenaline and absolute awe. She was magnificent. The firefight intensified as they reached the third floor. The O'Reillys had realized the breach was coming from inside and began funneling their men into the central corridor, leading to Cassandra's office. The air filled with deafening gunfire, plaster exploding from the walls in clouds of white dust. Dominic's voice crackled over the radio. "Boss, you have a heavy squad pinning down the corridor. I'm moving across the catwalk to flank them. Take them out, Dom," Christian yelled over the gunfire, pulling Maya behind a thick concrete pillar as a hail of bullets chipped away at the stone. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the building. The Irish mobsters had rolled a fragmentation grenade down the hall. "Get down!" Christian roared, tackling Maya to the floor, covering her body entirely with his own as the grenade detonated. The shockwave blew out every remaining glass window on the floor, raining shards over them, ears ringing. Maya pushed herself up. Christian groaned, rolling off her. A piece of shrapnel had caught him in the thigh, tearing through the tactical pants and leaving a bloody gash. "Christian!" Maya gasped, her hands immediately flying to the wound. "I'm fine," he gritted out, forcing himself up onto his good leg, his face pale, but his eyes burning with unrelenting fury. "Keep moving! She's right behind those double doors!" A burst of automatic fire from the ceiling shattered the remaining opposition. Dominic had reached the catwalks, raining death down on the corridor. The path was clear. Christian reloaded his rifle, limping heavily. He looked at the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall. Behind them sat the woman who had poisoned his wife, ordered the execution of his infant son, and nearly destroyed his empire. "Ready?" Christian asked, his voice a low, murderous growl. Maya raised her pistol, stepping up beside him. "Let's finish this." Christian didn't bother with the door handle. He lifted his heavy boot and kicked the oak double doors off their hinges. They crashed inward, splintering violently against the hardwood floor of the executive office. The room was vast, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the storm-tossed harbour. At the far end, behind a massive mahogany desk, stood Cassandra. She was dressed immaculately in a white designer suit, not a hair out of place, looking completely incongruous amidst the smoke, blood, and chaos of the war zone. In her right hand, she held a silver-plated revolver. Standing beside her was Declan O'Reilly, the head of the Irish mob, gripping a customized submachine gun. "I have to admit, Christian," Cassandra said, her voice smooth and dripping with venom. She didn't look afraid. She looked annoyed. "I didn't think you had the stomach to take down Silas, and I certainly didn't expect you to survive the assault on the estate. You always were a stubborn weed." Christian leveled his rifle at her chest. "It's over, Cassandra. Your men are dead. The Irish are bleeding out on the ground floor. Drop the gun." Declan O'Reilly scoffed, raising his weapon. "You're outnumbered, Hale. Your leg is shot to hell. You think you're walking out of here?" Before Declan could even put his finger on the trigger, Maya stepped out from behind Christian's shoulder. She raised her H&K and fired a single, perfect shot. The bullet tore straight through the center of Declan's forehead. The Irish mob boss collapsed backward, crashing through the glass window and plummeting 3 stories down into the freezing harbor below. The room went dead silent. Cassandra stared at the shattered window, her eyes widening in genuine shock. She slowly turned her gaze to Maya, taking in the black woman in the Kevlar vest, holding a smoking pistol with the steady hand of a seasoned executioner. The maid, Cassandra spat, her lips curling into a sneer of pure disgust. I should have known you'd cling to the help, Christian. First, you marry my weak, pathetic sister who didn't know the first thing about running an empire, and now you're hiding behind the babysitter. Don't you ever speak her name, Christian roared, his voice shaking the glass. He limped forward, his rifle aimed squarely at Cassandra's head. She was your blood. She loved you, and you slipped poison into her tea while she was nursing my newborn son. Cassandra laughed a sharp, hysterical sound. Loved me? She stole my birthright. Our father promised me the alliance with the K-Town syndicate. I was the one groomed for power. I was the one who understood the blood, the money, the ruthlessness required to sit at the head of the table. But you chose the soft sister, the one who wanted to plant gardens and bake cookies. She made you weak, Christian. She turned the feared K-Town boss into a domesticated dog. Cassandra's grip on the silver revolver tightened, her knuckles turning white. I did the syndicate a favor. I stopped her heart, so you could find yours again. But instead of returning to the shadows, you had a child, an heir, a squalling little brat who would inherit everything that rightfully belonged to me. Maya felt a cold, blinding rage wash over her. She thought of Leo. She thought of the tiny, innocent boy sleeping in the panic room, oblivious to the fact that his own aunt had ordered a hit squad to his crib. You're a monster, Maya said, her voice cold and dead flat. Cassandra sneered, leveling her silver revolver directly at Maya. And you are nothing but collateral damage. A stray dog that wandered into a lion's den. Cassandra, drop the gun, Christian yelled, stepping in front of Maya. Shoot me, Christian, Cassandra taunted, a manic gleam in her eyes. Do it. Shoot your wife's sister. Shoot the last remaining piece of her family. You won't do it. You're too soft. You always were. She was right about one thing. Christian hesitated. A split second of phantom grief for his dead wife clouded his vision. The face of the woman he had loved was mirrored in the face of the monster standing before him. Cassandra saw the hesitation and smiled triumphantly. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But Maya didn't have Christian's ghosts. Maya had no lingering affection for this woman. All Maya saw was the threat to her new family. Moving faster than Cassandra could comprehend, Maya stepped out from behind Christian's protective frame. She didn't raise her gun to aim. She fired from the hip, letting her training and raw instinct take over. Bang! Cassandra gasped, the silver revolver slipping from her fingers, clattering loudly onto the mahogany desk. She looked down in shock at the blossoming red stain spreading rapidly across the pristine white silk of her designer suit, right over her heart. She looked back up at Maya, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The arrogant sneer faded, replaced by the hollow, empty stare of death. Cassandra swayed on her high heels, then collapsed backward over her desk, crashing onto the floor in a tangle of limbs and shattered glass. Silence descended on the office, broken only by the howling wind blowing through the shattered windows and the distant wail of police sirens approaching the harbor. Maya stood frozen, her chest heaving, the barrel of her gun still smoking. She had killed before tonight in the nursery, in the stairwell. But this was different. This was the head of the snake. This was the end of the nightmare. Christian slowly lowered his rifle. He limped over to Cassandra's body, staring down at her to ensure the threat was truly neutralized. Then he turned to Maya. He didn't say a word. He crossed the room, grabbed her by the waist, and pulled her flush against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in, as if she were the only oxygen left in the room. Maya dropped her gun, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder. They held each other amidst the wreckage, two survivors of a brutal war, forged together in fire and blood. "Arthur," Christian croaked, tapping his earpiece, not letting Maya go. "Area secure." "Boss," Arthur's voice replied through the static. "The Irish are broken. The surviving traitors have surrendered. Pier 44 is ours. Send the medics to the executive office," Christian ordered, his voice finally regaining its authoritative rumble. "And call the estate. Tell them, we're coming home." 6 months later, the Hale estate looked entirely different. The gloom and suffocating tension that had once haunted the marble halls were gone, replaced by the warm golden light of a late summer afternoon. The high stone walls were still heavily guarded, the perimeter security tighter than ever, but inside, the fortress had finally become a home. The K-Town syndicate had undergone a brutal but necessary evolution. With Cassandra dead and the Irish mob dismantled, Christian's grip on the city's underground was absolute. But his rule had changed. He no longer operated out of cold, ruthless isolation. He had a partner. Maya stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom of the penthouse suite. She was no longer wearing the muted, practical uniforms of a caretaker, nor the blood-stained tactical gear of a soldier. She wore a stunning, deep crimson evening gown that hugged her curves flawlessly, the silk contrasting beautifully with her rich, dark skin. A diamond necklace, a gift from Christian, rested against her collarbone. She adjusted a diamond stud in her ear and smiled as the door to the bedroom clicked open. Christian stepped in. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his dark hair slicked back, looking every inch the untouchable Mafia king. The physical scars from the war at the harbour had healed, though the mental ones still lingered. But looking at Maya, the darkness in his eyes always gave way to a profound, unwavering adoration. He walked up behind her, wrapping his massive arms around her waist, pulling her back against his broad chest. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the side of her neck, making her shiver. "You look breathtaking," Christian murmured, his voice a deep rumble against her skin. "The capos won't know whether to bow to you or run from you," Maya chuckled, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "Let's hope it's a little bit of both. Dominic is still terrified of me, since the shooting range incident last week. Dominic is a smart man." Christian smiled, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "Are you ready for this?" Tonight was the annual Syndicate Gala, a gathering of every major power player, politician, and capo on the eastern seaboard. It was the night Christian was officially presenting his new empire to the world. More importantly, it was the night he was presenting Maya, not just as his partner in love, but as his equal in power. "I'm ready," Maya said, turning in his arms to face him. She reached up, gently adjusting his bow tie. "But first, we have to say goodnight to the real boss." Christian grinned, grabbing her hand and leading her out of the master suite and down the hall to the newly renovated nursery. The room was bathed in soft, warm light. Inside, 1-year-old Leo was standing up in his crib, gripping the wooden rails with his chubby hands. When he saw them enter, his face lit up with a massive, toothy grin. "Mama! Dada!" Leo babbled, bouncing excitedly. The word mama hit Maya with the same profound, overwhelming wave of love every single time. She wasn't just his protector anymore. She was his mother. She walked over, lifting the heavy toddler into her arms, uncaring that he was slightly rumpling her expensive silk gown. "Hey there, sweet boy," Maya cooed, pressing a kiss to his chubby cheek. "Are you ready for bed?" Christian stepped up beside them, wrapping one arm around Maya and using his free hand to gently ruffle Leo's dark hair. The image of the three of them, the fearsome Mafia boss, the brilliant, deadly queen who had saved his soul, and the innocent child who bound them together, was a testament to survival. Arthur is stationed right outside the door, and the perimeter is locked tight. Christian whispered to Leo, kissing his son's forehead. "You sleep tight, little man. We'll be right downstairs." Maya settled Leo back into his crib, pulling the soft blanket over him. They turned on his star projector nightlight, watching as he quickly settled down, his eyes drooping shut in absolute, peaceful security. They walked out of the nursery, Christian gently closing the door behind them. He turned to Maya, offering his arm. "Shall we, Miss Caldwell?" Christian asked, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. Maya looped her arm through his, her posture straightening, her expression shifting from a tender mother to the formidable donna of the K-Town syndicate. She had walked into this house, a desperate woman, looking for a paycheck. She had been hunted, betrayed, and nearly killed. But she had refused to be a victim. She had fought for the child she loved. She had fought for the man who had stolen her heart. And she had won. "Lead the way, Mr. Hale," Maya replied, her dark eyes flashing with confidence. Together, they walked toward the grand staircase, ready to descend into the glittering, dangerous world below. But this time, they weren't facing the shadows alone. They ruled them together. What an incredible, heart-stopping journey of survival, betrayal, and absolute power, from shivering on a freezing park bench to ruling the most feared Mafia syndicate in the city. Maya proved that true strength isn't about the power you inherit, but the family you fight to protect. Did you see that final twist with Cassandra coming? And how epic was Maya's final shot to save Christian's life? If you loved this intense, action-packed Mafia romance and want to hear more thrilling, dramatic stories about fierce women taking charge and claiming their thrones, please smash that like button. Share this video with your friends who love a good plot twist. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next real-life storytelling drama. Let us know your favorite part in the comments below.